Alright, so let's switch to camera instead of bridge. It's going to be more interesting. This is a CR2 file. I'm going to double click. Camera is going to open. CR2 file is the extension for Canon RAW file. If you use Nikon, obviously you have NEF, etc. So you know, according to the brand of your camera, the extension is going to change. But the most important part is we are working with a RAW file, meaning all the information that the sensor has seen at the scene this day, at this very particular moment when I released the shutter button, all these information, they are in the RAW file. And that's why it's obviously better than a JPEG that is encoded with only 8 bits and only 256 values of luminance. We have thousands of values in camera. Well, first of all, let me talk about the version I'm using just real quick. It's a 9.8 version. At the time of this recording, it's Photoshop 2017, CC 2017. Adobe, as I said earlier, is pushing really hard for everything online. So they want you to use the Creative Cloud storage, they want you to use Adobe Stock and the libraries, etc. But long story short, if you have a previous version, it's going to be fine. So you can follow along this tutorial using Photoshop CC Vanilla, for example. What's good with Photoshop CC 2014, and that's why I said you should, if possible, have 2014, is because you can load Camera Raw as a filter starting from Photoshop CC 2014. And that's very useful because there is a clarity setting that is, I think, very useful. And you can load it on any layer using Camera Raw as a filter, and that's available only starting from Photoshop CC 2014, not before. However, most of what we're going to be doing for the portrait will be actually doable and compatible with Photoshop CS6, so back in 2012. So if you still have the box and you haven't subscribed to the Creative Cloud, most of what we're going to be doing, like I guess 90%, you will be able to do that in this previous version, so it's going to be fine. So because I have subscribed to the Creative Cloud, I have the last version, and that is 9.8. So just don't freak out by the 9.8 up there. If you have like Camera 8, it's going to be fine. You just need to have the Mark III compatible with your version of Camera, right? So in case it doesn't work, you can go to the Adobe website and download the latest version. And I think, I'm not too sure because I don't know all the versions and all the camera brands and all the RAW files and all that, but the Canon 5D Mark III is, I think, compatible with Photoshop CS6. So you can have a Camera Raw compatible with CS6 that is actually able to open 5D Mark III. It has to be verified, but yeah, I'm setting this tutorial saying you should have 2014 CC just to make sure, but actually it's compatible with the previous version. Right, so anyway, I would give you also a TIFF version, so you can open this file in Photoshop directly and you don't have to go through Camera Raw anyway. So this is Camera Raw. We have to talk about it because it is very important. If you know Camera Raw already, you know it's very powerful because it's able to read all the data taken that day and captured by the sensor. So we have a lot more information than we see inside of that file. For this particular portrait, what I want to do is reveal some of the shadows, because if you look at the histogram, so we have the light spread across the histogram, but most of the information are actually in the shadows. And well, that's normal because we used a strub with a softbox, and that was just one strub for this particular photos. Usually I use two of them, but for this one there was only one. It's coming from the right hand side and it's higher than the model, okay? So we have the light hitting the face and a lot of shadows around with the hair, and obviously a real background, black background, right? So we don't have to fake it using a post process. It was actually a black paper, so it's already black in camera, so that's cool. So that's why we have so many pixels considered as shadows, but the face itself is actually well exposed. Now, I still want a bit more details in the shadows and I want to reveal them. So using the basic panel, and I don't really like that name because it's not basic at all. This is where you're gonna retouch your photo. 90% of the look of your photo, if you're using camera, is going to be done in that panel, because this is where you set up your light. If you mess up your light, your photo is gone. So the exposure is the setting you want to use if you need to modify the entire exposure of the photo, the entire light, because everything is going to be moving. Look at the histogram up there. Everything is moving from one way to the other, right? I think the exposure, the overall exposure is actually good. What I want is a bit more light, to feel some light in the shadows, and I have a slider for that. If I push it to the right, I take the shadows and I make them brighter, right? And this reveals hair and details in the shadows. This is exactly what I need. I have this button pressed here now, and this is the black clipped indicator. It shows pixels here in blue that are clipped as black, like they are completely black, and that could be a warning for underexposure. I don't have that many, which is cool. We have the same for overexposed pixels, and I don't have overexposed pixels. So it's all good, okay? I'm just going to adjust fit in view in the drop-down menu so the photo is using as much space as possible. So just with one slider on this photo, we reveal a lot of details, and that's what I wanted. So not a lot to do on this photo, I mean on the light. However, we're going to work in black and white directly in camera. So as I said in the introduction, there are a lot of different ways to approach black and white portrait. So what you can do is create the black and white in camera, and this is what we're going to be doing. But what I think is the best is then to retouch the skin in Photoshop exclusively, because you've got a lot more tools, a lot more, and they are a bit more powerful, obviously. They are more precise, they are a bit more time consuming, but they are more precise. Now, if you want to go real quick in camera, I guess you can use the the spot removal tool to clean the skin a tiny bit, and I guess you can use the local adjustment and use the clarity in negative to get a smooth skin. This is not the best result for me. This is not what I like to do, but I guess you could do that. So this is how it's going to work. I'm going to show you how the black and white is working, and then I'm going to create a snapshot. So we're going to save the state of the photo, saying now in that state I would go to Photoshop and finish the work specifically on the skin, because I want to retouch the skin in Photoshop. Now there will be a second scenario for this video where we're going to continue to work in camera and try to achieve the black and white portrait from start to finish, A to Z, entirely in camera, right? So depending to what you want to do and the time you want to spend and the way you want to do it, you will be able to choose one scenario or the other, or you can actually do both as a training, and I guess you will be able to find the one that is the most suitable for you and the one you prefer. But first of all, we have to know how the black and white is working in camera, and I'm going to explain. It's not a comprehensive training on camera entirely, so we're not going through every slider, and plus I guess you already know camera. You're here to learn about how to retouch a portrait and make a good black and white portrait. This is what's interesting today. So if you go to the this button, it's the fourth one coming from the left. It's called HSL grayscale. HSL stands for hue, saturation and luminance. These sliders allow you to modify the colors in three different aspects. The colors themselves, so hue is actually the color, right? So red is a hue, orange is a hue, and etc. Saturation, well, this is what you're gonna say if you want your red to be really vivid or kind of grayish, right? So if I put the red all the way at the left, you can see the lips are now gray, right? And all the way at the right, it's really a vivid red, not bright red, just really vivid, okay? And really, well, saturated. And same for luminance, and as you guess, this is going to be dark and this is going to be bright. So for each color, you can manipulate according to what you want to achieve. So in a photo like this, you have to remember most of the information we need is actually on the orange slider, because this is the skin, right? So if we convert to grayscale, it's going to take all the colors from the original photo and convert them to a gray value. And this is going to be separated by the original colors. So the red is going to be more or less bright or dark, depending the way you want to see it. Orange is more or less bright or dark, etc. So the way you sculpt a black and white in camera is by converting from the color. So now you may be wondering, well, I actually shot the photograph using the black and white in the camera, and still when I open it in camera, it doesn't show as black and white. Well, your sensor is not working. Well, actually it is, but we're not going to get too dirty nerdy into the details. It works with luminance by default and then convert with the RGB, and it's the Bayer process, but we're not going to explain that. But by default, the raw file is actually in color. It's just that when you activate the black and white mode in your camera, the camera is doing what I just done for you inside of the camera, right? So it shows you a black and white version, but it's actually not black and white on the SD card or whatever card you use for your camera. It is in color. So when it shows up in camera, it's going to show up in color, and then you will have to convert it in black and white, which is cool because if it was converted to black and white, well, the black and white selection would have been done for you, and everything is chosen for you, and yeah, that's it. You don't have much choice on what you do in camera, and that's not good. You want to be able to sculpt it the way you want. For example, if you want like a really bright skin, we can take that orange slider and go to the right. If we want the lips to be really bright as well, because we used a red lipstick, again, we can push that slider to the right, or do the opposite, make it really dark. And on the oranges, well, obviously we can't go too far on the left, but still we can do a very dramatic portrait. It's a bit harsh on the skin, but it's a bit more dramatic and it gives a look to your image. So you have, it's a very flexible way to convert to grayscale and do what we call black and white photography. It's not actually technically black and white, it is grayscale from a technical point of view. We use a grayscale, we use from dark to white using grays. Obviously it's not just two colors being the black and the white, but we say black and white photography, but technically it means grayscale. So this is how we convert from color to grayscale. Now there is another way, and I didn't even show you, I think I shouldn't even show you that way, but it is going to saturation and desaturate. But if you do that, then, well, that's pretty much it. There is no other way to personalize and customize this black and white. It's just an unsaturated, desaturated version of your original picture. There is nothing else going on here. So if we go back to saturation 0, let me just show you something. Everything that's been done in exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, all of that, this is going to be taken into account when I convert to black and white. Let's go back to black and white. Let's convert back to grayscale. And let me show you that the shadows slider, it is actually doing something beforehand. It is doing its thing, and then the grayscale is going to take that into account and do the grayscale on top of it. So everything that's been done in these sliders is taken into account. Well, I'm saying that because let's say, for example, we want to shift the color of the eyes, and we want to do something on the eyes, or maybe on the skin, or maybe on the lips, using colors. Say, for example, I want the reds to be actually pink, and I want them to be a bit brighter. I want to go to the eyes, so that should be something around aquas and blues. And if I don't know where it's going to be situated in the sliders, what I can do is I can jump to the saturation, the U target, and I say, well, you're going to choose for me. And it's actually greens and aquas, surprisingly. And then I can try to shift the color of the eyes a tiny bit. And same for saturation. Yeah, it's just a tiny bit of blue pixels being saturated, so it's not doing a lot. Let's say for the skin, for example, we want to go to luminance and then darken the skin a bit. Right, so now if I convert to grayscale, it's not going to take into account what I've done before. Meaning, if I have now the lips being pink or magentas, if we use the camera vocabulary. However, if I convert to grayscale, well, magentas, there's nothing going on, but reds, the lips are changed now. And that means whatever I've done before converting to grayscale in that very specific panel is not taken into account. And that's a very important thing to remember. Everything you do in HSL is not being converted to grayscale. What it does, it removes all you've done in this panel and take the photo the way it was before and then convert to grayscale. So if you do stuff in basic panel, that will be taken into account, even the white balance, for example. Everything you do in the parametric and point curve, that will be taken into account, no problem. Same for sharpening and noise reduction. However, the HSL grayscale is not working in a cumulative way, right? It's not going to be cumulated with what you've done before. It's either you work in HSL or you work in grayscale, but it can't be both. As soon as you click convert to grayscale, HSL doesn't exist anymore. So I wanted to show you that because it's very, very important. So I messed up the settings a tiny bit now. So if I click on this button on the right, I can say camera default, right? So this is now the default file, and I go back to basic panel and put 90 or 85 for the shadows. So this is my starting point. If you want to save a snapshot, so to save the state of a development before you try anything crazy, you can go to the last button. It's called snapshots. If you click on that file, that icon representing a new file button, it's actually a new snapshot, and I can say, yeah, this is going to be my starting point, and let's say 1_. So keeping things tidy. Click OK. So this is my starting point, and now you know how to convert to black and white. So for this photo, I'm gonna go for kind of a dramatic look. It's gonna be a bit harsh on the skin. It's gonna reveal things on the skin. And I want to correct the skin afterward in Photoshop because I want to make sure that I correct the skin the best way possible. And the very logical way to do this is to correct the skin once you've converted to black and white and not before. Otherwise, you're going to correct the skin and get the skin the way you want in color. And then by converting it to black and white, maybe you're going to reveal new problems. Or maybe the black and white conversion you're going to be doing is going to get really easy, and basically you spend an hour correcting the skin for nothing because the way you did it in black and white actually hid some details on the skin. So you've done a correction on something people can't see anymore. So just to make sure you work on what's necessary, I would first convert to black and white and then correct the skin. So this is the scenario I've imagined for this file. So I'm going to convert to grayscale. I'm going to say I want the gray for the oranges to be a bit dark, and the lips, I want them to be really dark. So it's kind of a dark look. And now that I have this version in grayscale, maybe I'm going to go back to the basic panel, and I think we're going to reveal a bit more shadows and maybe a tiny bit of exposure, right? So we get a brighter overall photo. Right, I think that's a good base to work with in Photoshop for the skin. So now this is the state of the skin that I will have to correct, okay? Because I've done these settings in black and white, I revealed, or maybe some details are hidden, but it's done something on the skin, and I want to correct the skin the way it looks now, not the way it was looking when it was in color. So at this point, I should create a new snapshot and say, well, this is going to be the second big step of my retouching, and this is going to be converted to black and white. Right, so I have space, so don't hesitate to actually say what the snapshot is about, because this snapshot is going to be saved as an XMP file, which is called a sidecar file, right? And every time the photo is going to be opened with this XMP in the folder, you will retrieve the settings, but also the snapshot, meaning you can work as a team, you can send this file to your client or someone you're working with, and they will be able to see the snapshots, right? So if you actually comment them in a way that is understandable by humans, that's better. Well, I'm not saying you should write a novel, but you can actually give some details about what you're doing in this snapshot. So I'm going to click OK, and actually there's a typo, converted, but yeah, it's converted to black and white. So now I should probably switch to Photoshop. This is what I would do personally in my particular workflow, but then again I want to show you a way to do everything in Camera without even getting to use Photoshop. So if you prefer to do it this way, it's up to you. It doesn't mean it's going to look bad, it doesn't mean it would be an inferior version. I know some people that do they do everything in Camera, or actually in Lightroom, because as you know, Camera is using the same engine as Lightroom, so everything you're going to be doing here could be done in Lightroom exactly the same way with the same settings. Right, so this is the second step, and I'm going to continue in Camera and retouch the skin. So the best way to retouch the skin and get a smooth skin, not too smooth because I want this photo to be dramatic with a lot of details and a lot of emphasis on the eyes, right? But we want to remove some of the imperfection of the skin. Okay, so this button here is the spot removal tool. You may want to zoom in for this because we want to see the details. So this has been taken with a Canon 5D Mark III, and this is a 5760 pixels by 3840 pixels. So we've got details, right? This is just 200%, and we already have a lot of details we don't want to see. Usually I would work 100% size because, well, there's no way your picture is going to be published at that size. However, if you think it's going to be printed in a gallery, in a very big canvas, on a very big canvas, then you may want to zoom in even further to make sure some details are not visible when you're in a close range. Right, so with this button it's very easy. Adjust the size and you can just click, and Camera is going to analyze for you the best texture for this particular spot. If you want to tell Camera what you want for this texture, you can actually drag the green circle, and this texture is going to be blended with the one in the red circle. Okay, so red circle, this is where the spot has to be removed, and the green is a texture used to remove the spot. Now this is because we're in type heal mode. If we were in clone mode, well, that would be easy to understand. It is an actual clone, okay? And well, of course, if you use clone mode, and if you do that too often, well, people will see some parts have been cloned, and that's not good. So heal is a bit more clever because it's going to blend with the actual texture. Okay, so you adjust the size. You can also draw if you want. You don't have to just point and click. You can just draw. I'm going down just to show you on the right part, and adjust the size to 8, 9. Right, so see here, I want to remove that line. The brush is going to be drawn exactly the way you did with the mouse or the Wacom tablet. So the pen pressure is not supported because there's not really a lot to do with the pen pressure, but still you can use a Wacom tablet and remove all the imperfection you want. So it's up to you to find like a compromise between going too smooth on the skin and actually removing what you want to remove. For some shot, I like to have a really smooth skin, like almost a dull result, really smooth. It's nice. For this particular shot, I want details. I want a really dramatic look. I want it to be dark. So I think I'm going to leave some imperfections, right? So it has to be real. We have to feel really close to the model, and we have to feel that she is looking at us, right? So there's always a story to tell with a photo. So don't remove too much on this one. At least I think for this photo, that's not what I want. But for your photos, you're the photographer, so it's your story. Up to you to choose up to what point you want to go for the retouching. So I'm trying to do this real quick, and I don't want it to be boring for you, but I think what I want is removing like the most visible. I don't want the audience, the people watching this photo, to be disturbed by unwanted elements that are too visible even at a distant range. We are really close here, so that's obviously not really representative of the way of people will be seeing it. If it's on internet, it's probably going to be 50%, right? If it's full screen, this is probably what you will have to use in a browser, I guess. Now, if it's printed, that's a different story. Like if it's in a gallery and people are able to see it like in A1, A0 size, that's a huge print size, and people will watch it from a few meters distance, but they can get really close if it's in a gallery. So you want to make sure the spot removal process is done according to the final publishing size. Now, if you don't know it, well, that's tough because we have to make a decision. I think for this particular photo, I want to remove a bit more on the cheek here, but actually I'm pretty much done with the spot removal process, and I think I get a nice detailed skin. Not too smooth, not yet, because we're going to use clarity, and again, it's going to be up to you to choose. But I think we removed all the distractions, I would say. Like I don't want the people to be distracted by elements on the skin. So now we have nice details, and I think we can switch to this tool here, which is adjustment brush, and that's very powerful. Well, this is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to paint with an adjustment, and that adjustment will be clarity, negative clarity here. What it does, it's a micro contrast, like local contrast adjustments. When camera is analyzing the picture and it finds a pixel that is brighter than the pixel just next to it, which is going to be darker, it's going to even the difference with a negative clarity. If you use a positive clarity, it's going to increase the difference. So the pixel that is brighter than the other is going to get even brighter. And this is a good way to reveal details and texture on a photo. And like a side effect will be increasing it will look a bit more sharp, like it's going to be sharper, definitely, but it increases the texture of the skin. We want to do the opposite. We want to smoothen the skin a bit, not too much. Again, it's going to be up to you. So maybe a clarity -25, you can adjust it afterhand if you want. So the size is way too much here, so I'm going to switch to 8. Way too much. 5, the feather is the second circle where the setting will be applied from 100 to 0. So the cross in the center is actually made when you use the auto-masking feature. You have a first circle. Inside that circle, the inner circle, the setting will be applied 100%. So it's going to be minus clarity 24, right? From the inner circle to the outer circle, the setting will be applied to 100% to 0%. It's a feather effect. Like it's a progressive way to apply the setting so it doesn't look too harsh on the skin or where you're actually painting. So this is how I'm going to use it. And if you can't see the difference, it's probably because camera hasn't finished to render it because I'm recording on a 4K monitor. And what I want to do is just switch to mask here and reveal the mask in red and click mask. Right, so now I have the mask activated, so I know where I have already painted. Okay, so let's paint on the face, and I want to avoid the eyes because I want all the details to be preserved in the eyes. Forefront, obviously I need that to be smooth, not too smooth, but I want that to be smooth. Okay. Now uncheck mask, and let me show you, this is 0, or pretty much, right, 0. This is minus 100, and it looks really smooth, like almost fashion magazine. And this is plus 100. And well, you know what, for this particular photo, it looks harsh on the skin of the model, but it is almost looking as if she was, I don't know, coming back from the dead, or full of mud, or after like I don't know, she was out in the forest for 2 years. You could tell a story with that. So we used to see photos of models with the skin really smooth, and it looks really like it looks fashion magazine style. It looks really smooth. It looks pretty much fake most of the time. So it all depends on the story you want to tell. Okay, so for this one, I want the attention to be on the eyes, and I want you to look at her the way she's looking at you. So I want the skin to be present and detailed, and I don't want to lie. There are imperfections on this skin. She's got beautiful skin actually, but I mean, when you're that close to someone, you will see texture on the skin, believe me. So I think between minus 50 and 25 is good, because it removes distraction from imperfection on the skin, but you still have a lot of details. And this is what we're going to be doing in the frequency separation. I'm going to show you a way to even the light while preserving the texture, but still preserving the texture, still keeping some details on the skin. If you want to go further, if you want to have it really smooth, again, it's up to you, but I wanted to show you clarity because this is how we retouch the skin in camera. Okay, so this is how I would do it for this photo in camera, right? So this is the basic steps. This is a basic step for retouching, using minus something in the clarity, using the local adjustment after having used the spot removal, and we stayed in camera, right? So there will be another video at the end where I'm gonna use what I've done here and finish again this photo in camera. What I want to do now is just switch to Photoshop so we see the other scenario, the one where we touch the skin entirely in Photoshop. So I want to save the snapshot because again I will be switching back to this photo in the state it is now in camera, and we're going to finish it in camera with some finishing touches with the sharpening process, and I'm going to show you again how to export from camera. We'll show you how to export from Photoshop, but I will show you also how to export from camera. So let's create a new snapshot, and this one's going to be 3_ skin retouching. And we're going to leave the photo in that state, but first let's switch back to convert it to black and white. And from that state, we're gonna go to the other scenario where we retouch the skin in Photoshop using frequency separation technique. So now I have to tell you how you can open images in Photoshop. If you click open image, well, it's just going to open it in Photoshop, and that's it, right? But first, let me show you here these options because they are really important. You want to make sure you use a depth of 16 bits per channel. Otherwise, the photo is going to be converted and it's going to be sent to Photoshop using, well, 8 bits, which is a shame because your sensor, it's got a lot more information than 8 bits per channel, and you want to keep all the details. So when you paint in Photoshop using, for example, a neutral gray layer, when you use a curve, when you use a level adjustment, you want all the information to be available. The screen by default is not revealing these details for you, but if you use adjustment that reveal them, you want to make sure you use all the technical details of your photo. These details in 8 bits mode, they're going to be gone. So make sure you work in 16 bits per channel. Now, because this is converted to black and white, well, grayscale, the space that we'll be using is gray gamma 2.2. Right, so if you send this photo to Photoshop while it's in color, it's actually better to have it in Adobe RGB or even better Pro Photo RGB, and then you will be doing the grayscale conversion using the black and white adjustment layer. We're going to talk about that because, as I said, there are several ways to approach the black and white creation. What we've seen here is the way where we create the black and white in camera and then finish the skin retouching in Photoshop. in a video later, I will show you how to create a black and white inside Photoshop with the color version of this photo. So you will see all the different ways to do it. But right now, this photo is going to be gray gamma 2.2, and that's normal. So make sure it's 16 bits per channel to save all the details, and make sure, well, you don't have a choice for the moment, but you could manually select a different profile, but I suggest you stick to gray gamma if you have converted from camera, right? So in this particular scenario, just stick with it. Image sizing, you don't want to resize it because you want to work with the entire size, like the default size, like all the pixels, and no sharpening. And there is this tick box here, which is very important. It's open in Photoshop as smart objects, and that means the raw file is going to be converted into a smart layer. So when you will be saving this file as a PSD later on, the actual raw file is going to be inside the PSD. So if one day you lose the CR2 file, but you save the PSD, you still have all the information of the raw file and everything you've done here inside the PSD. Now the drawback is, well, of course the PSD is going to be a lot heavier on the hard disk. Now I don't always use smart objects, but just for the sake of being really tidy here, I'm going to click open in Photoshop as smart objects. Now if you don't want to do that by default, you can actually trigger the opening as a smart object by using Shift. As you can see, when I press the Shift key, the open image is actually switching to open object. So the end is going to be the same. We're switching to Photoshop using these settings. However, open object is going to save the CR2 file inside that PSD. So yeah, let's do the really tidy way, and this is going to be open object. So Photoshop is going to be started even if you haven't started it. I have started it already, so it's just going to convert the file and send it to Photoshop. So as you can see, we have that little icon that shows it's a I forgot the name. Smart object. Ooh. This is a smart object, and inside that smart object, double click, we have the raw file with everything we've done inside it, even the snapshot. So now I could even delete the original CR2 file, and providing I save the PSD, the raw file is saved. So let's just save this one, and in the next video, I'll be showing you, so I'm now in the my PSD portfolio folder. Let's just put that on the desktop and click save, right? So just do it the way you want on your hard drive, because I don't know how you keep things tidy on your computer. Usually I do work in the OneDrive folder, so everything I do is actually being synced online. If you use like Google Drive or Dropbox or Creative Cloud, do as you prefer. I usually do OneDrive, but because this one is not the one I'll be saving, for the sake of this video, I'm just gonna save to the desktop. Right, so now it's in Photoshop the way we want, 16 bits in gray. We have done the black and white, and this is the photo we wanted, and this is the way we wanted it. So now it's time for skin retouching inside Photoshop, and let's do that in the next video.